Well, we jumped out of Daniel chapter 4 into Daniel chapter 5, and this is a pretty unique chapter because it's got more weird stories like Daniel has, but also it's this character just jumps in out of nowhere. We've had 4 chapters, and does anybody know who the main character besides Daniel has been in all of these? Who's the other guy here? If we're going to say there's the good side and evil side, Daniel's been the good guy. Who's been the evil side? Does anybody remember? We've used his name. Maybe you just know the first 3 letters. Anybody know? Nebuchadnezzar, that's right. Very common name, right? You hear that in Sycamore. In the starting lineup for the Sycamore Spartans, Nebuchadnezzar. It's never happened. But you should remember that name. I've said it about 50,000 times in the first 4 chapters. Well, he's gone now, but not really. Daniel, who's the author of this book, he's not just journaling, okay? Daniel's not just going, hey, this happened the other day. I might ought to write that down. We always have to remember that the Bible, the books, the letters that we have that have been preserved for us, have been preserved for us because God wants us to have them. Not just because He thinks they're cool, but because He is behind the inspiration. So as men went about their lives freely, doing, seeing, participating, and writing, they did it also under the inspiration of God. So when we look at the book of Daniel, we see something historical, but also we see something where we can see God and Daniel saw something that would fit, that lines up with the theme of the book, not necessarily this explanation, because this isn't a historical narrative. Okay? It contains historical narrative, but he's not telling us what the price of milk was in Babylon that day. He's not telling us this information or that. He's sharing with us pictures, stories of the sovereignty of God. And chapter 5 is just another aspect of that, but it's incongruent with all the subject matter, but it's not like Nebuchadnezzar walks in and goes, hey, I'm going to take a break for a little while, and this guy's taking over. There's no transition. It's kind of odd to where it's placed. But Daniel's purpose wasn't to write this narrative of, how this is how everything seemed to happen in this perfect little order. So he doesn't give us context. He doesn't say, I'm just putting this here because of so-and-so. And the reason that is because he was there. He wasn't writing this for people 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years in the future, 3,500 years in the future for them to go, yeah, cool, that, I need to put that in there, okay? So I probably spoke too much about that, but as you study a book and something is different, you should ask, what's going on here? This is odd. Where's Nebuchadnezzar? Where did he disappear? He's been the main character for the first 4 chapters, and now he's gone. Now we're dealing with his great-grandson, okay? And how does this all come about? So, Daniel chapter 5, verses 1 through 31. Have you ever heard the saying, the writing is on the wall? Has anybody ever heard that before? Right? You've heard that before. The writing's on the wall. It's obvious what's going on, right? That's where that comes from. It comes from this chapter, Daniel chapter 5, because God literally makes a hand appear and write on the wall for the men to see. Okay, so it's a cool story. Whatever the case is as to why Daniel chose to put this here and record it in chapter 5, we don't know, but it doesn't really matter. We can see a very strong contrast between this new character, and I'll try to say his name correctly, Belshazzar, okay? A lot of consonants, right? It's a lot of those in speaking, not a ton of vowels. So Belshazzar and Nebuchadnezzar. What we see here is we see this totally different scenario. We see God being extremely patient with Nebuchadnezzar, right? Like He gives him epochs of time to learn that God is God and no one else is God. And eventually Nebuchadnezzar says that. After his kingdom falls, after his pride is just exposed, and he's the greatest in the world until figuring out God is saying, no, you're not. And it's best if you realize that I am God and you are not. It will save you. If you realize that you do not have to be the smartest and the wisest and the most handsome or the prettiest or the this or the that you are who you are, and it's completely okay because I made you that way. And the key to that is He made me that way, okay? That doesn't give me a right to sin because I'm a certain way, because I have a certain attitude, because I have a certain way about me. Some of us are more quiet than others. Would we agree? Does anybody know someone that's a little quiet? Right? Nobody. Everybody's a loudmouth. Okay, well, remind me not to come over to your house for the holidays. Some people are a little more soft-spoken, right? Some people have to have their buttons really pushed, but when they're pushed, right, a lot goes down because they've been quiet, they haven't said anything, but it hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there, it's just kind of tucked away in a little safe place. But if the right buttons are pushed, Miss Judy's grinning, don't know why. The right buttons are pushed and then blammo, right? Hey, okay, that's enough talking. You can shut up now. Others of us, we have more of a momentarily release of our emotions, right? Some of us are a little more, you're the one in traffic who's a little more like this, right? The more traffic is like, oh, hey, I see this guy's going through. Loser! Get out of my face. You don't reserve it. Like it's just get it out now because it'll be painful if I hold that in, right? You have a strong opinion. And if it's a strong opinion, others need to hear it. It's the way you are, okay? It's just the way you are. But it doesn't give us an excuse to be rude. And you can be rude by being silent. I'm going through this thing with my children right now. When I give them a direct command, like pick up your shoes or put your coat away or your underwear don't belong on the TV. I've actually had to say that. Maybe you have too. The things you have to say as a parent are ridiculous. They should never have to come out of your mouth, right? Why are you doing that? Why are you holding that in your hand? That goes in a special place. That's supposed to go somewhere else, and you're holding it and carrying it around the house. What are you doing, right? So the thing I'm going through with my kids right now is to respond to me verbally when I give them a command, right? I'll say, hey, pick your shoes up and put them where they belong. Even if they go and do it, but they don't say, and my thing is, yes, sir, I believe that's a sign of respect. I want my kids to learn that. Because when they don't respond with that, when they know that's my direction, what are they communicating to me when they don't respond? You've all done it, right? What's it called? Silent? Martin Luther King, right? My kids know Martin Luther King. They do it every day. My kids are doing this thing where I tell them, hey, I want you to do this. They're not violently at me going, no, kill the man. My kids aren't doing that. I don't have to respect you. I don't have to obey your wishes. But inside, I'm just like, you. And the silence, there's no disrespectful tone, but the silence is communicating to me, I'll do it, but I don't want to. So when they don't verbalize their response to me, I take that as a no, I don't want to do this. I'll do it anyway because you're my dad, but I really don't want to. So they're starting to learn to respond to me verbally because I personally believe it's rude when someone speaks to you, you should say something back. That's just the way I say it. It's the way I see it. It's the way I believe it is. I don't believe a kid has the right to make decisions on his own about certain things. I believe that certain things are cut and dry, black and white. You do it. I'm the boss. If you don't like it, I don't care. You're going to do it. And you may hate me for the next 15 years, but 15 years after that, you'll understand what I was trying to get out of you. Nebuchadnezzar was very outspoken about his power and his authority and his abilities, and God spoke out against him, but he gave him several different times and opportunities for him to see that, to be brought to that place of humility so that he could learn that God is God. Because that was the whole purpose. It wasn't so he could be a better king. Never get lost in that. It's so easy to believe that God is doing these things in me and through me because I have a greater purpose. Don't fall for that. Don't think that God is only working on you because He has something great waiting for you and you can't accomplish that unless He changes you. No. There's nothing greater than you being able to know God. Nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Never forget that. There may be some sub-purpose to where God uses your talents and gifts and you wouldn't have been usable and He can use you in some area, but He doesn't do that so He can use you because He needs you. Don't ever fall into that. God humbles Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar speaks what every one of us are supposed to speak when we're humbled by God, is He is sovereign. He is the one true God. That's it. That's where it ends. And if you can say that, everything falls in line after that. So don't fall into this belief, because you could spend the rest of your life disappointed, believing, well, why did I go through all of this when I didn't become some great leader and change this nation and force them to have clean water because God used me and I was humble and that's what happened? No. Don't set yourself up for another thing that has to happen for you to believe that God loves you. He does. And the things He's doing in your life to reveal your weaknesses, your sin, the dirty parts that you don't want anyone to know about, that He knows about, and He wants you to know that He knows, and then still loves you, that stuff is so what you will say, He is by all means sovereign and He is by all means good. And because He is good, I can trust Him. And if I can trust Him, it doesn't matter if there's a great purpose for me or not, or if I wash dishes the rest of my life. I can be content because God Almighty seems to be enough for me. You see that? This whole purpose thing came about 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so now everybody's like, oh yeah, I want a relationship with God because that will give me purpose. Don't do it. Because when we use that language, it's always something fantastic, right? I've met so many people who feel like their lives are meaningless because they're not always doing something fantastic. There's not something where there should be fireworks involved or a banner. You know what I'm saying? Listen, some of the most important things, the most important things that happen in your life are very mundane. You may not like that, but it's true. And our society is a victim of this, and our age group is a victim of this. Everything is supposed to be photo-worthy. Everything's supposed to be just perfect, right? Chefs all over the world are going nuts. Do you know why? Because everybody's taking pictures of their food. You know what I mean? You used to be able to go in and order fried chicken and fries, and they'd throw it on a plate, and the girl would bring you over and have her thumb in it, you know what I mean, and lay it down in front of you. Oh, not now. That sucker has to look like God Himself put that together when He put it on your plate. Because they know, oh, don't touch it. Got to get a picture first. It's going to get cold. Shut your face. I'm getting a picture. This is more important. We're supposed to eat it. You eat it. I'm going to take a picture, right? So you take a picture. It's like, I may need another picture. I got to figure out what I'm going to say about it, right? Because I want the whole world to experience this with me. And I'm over there drooling. Can I have it? Can I have the chicken leg? Can I gnaw on it? Can I lick it? It'll look moist. Just let me lick it. You know what I'm saying? Just something. No, you stay away. We need to take a picture. By the way, my wife doesn't do that, but I know a lot of people that do. Everything has to be an experience. And it not just an experience, I mean like, wow, right? Like, oh, this is worthy of a picture. But then we do it, and then half the time, the smiles in the picture are not even real. They're the smile to make you think it's real. What kind of life is that? But then when we find something mundane, and here our lives are busy, our lives are crazy, right? We're always late for something, running somewhere, trying to fit something else in, and deep down, we're praying for mundane. What's that song? Beautiful Crazy? I can't quote it, but it basically says, she wants to go out, then she decides just wants to sit on the couch and watch TV. Dude, do you know how nice sitting on the couch and watching TV is? Anybody raise a hand to that? Or your iPad or whatever. You think about all the adventures. Like the world is telling us right now, if you haven't been to Peru and climbed something, you're a loser. You are selling your life short, right? If you haven't rescued a village from machinery who's eating trees, you just kill yourself. You're not worthy to live. If you don't have something just fantastic happening in the last year or planned for the next year, but deep down we want something to be simple. We want something to be relaxed. So for a little while, we just want nothing. We just want to just have nothing for a little while. Some of our lives, most of our lives, are completely okay with that. You see, because if your life is focused on someone else, It's not about your adventure. It's about you witnessing the greatest adventure, and that is God's interaction with everyone you love. And they come to you and they tell you, oh my gosh, I'm going through this, whether it's a smile, whether it's tears, the whole time you know exactly what's going on. God is humbling, God is breaking this person to realize that He's the one. That He's the one. He's the greatest friend. He's the greatest lover. He's the greatest provider. He's all of these things. And all these things in my life that I want to be fantastic and I want to be perfect and I want to be memorable are just distractions from the one that is actually worth remembering, which is why we do the Lord's Supper, in remembrance of Him. Why do we have to be reminded of a good, gracious God? Because we do. Because there's always something better on the horizon. There's always something fantastic. That next relationship, that next person that's going to fulfill our dreams and fantasies. It's a lie. He is the only one that can fill the God-shaped vacuum in your heart. He's it. And the sooner you realize it and you let Him do His part and His role in filling that, all these other people who you've placed these expectations on of being fantastic, because here's the thing, when you want your life to be fantastic, you want everyone else to help you be fantastic. And you want to talk about a weight on shoulders that cannot be carried. Especially if they're listening to Beautiful Crazy. Before long, they're just going to be hearing the crazy. And witnessing to perfection God mold and shape young men and women, old men and women, children who were born in His image, to be His image bearers and to see Him shape them not only on the outside but most importantly on the inside, become followers of Him and trusters of Him, and those who live their lives based on not some moral principle or moral code they learned back in the 20s, but this idea that God is good and gracious. And if He has a purpose for me that causes me to go out and do something great, that's great, but it's going to be Him that does it. This isn't my idea. It's not because I need this to be great for me to love it. It's because He loves me and that's all that matters. And life will simplify. That's what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He went through all of this and then came to the point, none of this matters. God is on the throne. I am not. And earthly speaking was the worst moment of his life. Spiritually speaking, forever, eternal speaking, the greatest words that he's ever spoken. Because he realized what mattered. And he saw it, and God took him as far as He can. Well, this new guy comes on the scene, and guess what happens? God starts another 10 or 15-year process. Nope, not how it works. God isn't patient that long with everybody. Because sometimes as a parent, patience is, for certain situations, is months and years, right? Like you've got to let things develop and work themselves up. You have to be patient. You can't just jump in and go, "Wow." But other situations where you're still patient because the situation is extremely intense, it's not this drawn out thing, it's this really intense situation, right? Think of, for instance, this way. You have a child who's having a rough time at school. Okay? There's a couple kids that aren't being nice, they're saying some stuff, spreading some rumors, and as a parent, you can pounce, right? You can jump right in there and say, "Hey, listen here, right? I'm going to show you something. Who are this kid's parents? I'm going to punch them in the face," right? That's no patience, whatever. So you have to say, you know what? Let's talk to our child. Let's work this out. Let's make sure they understand that, sticks and stones, we got to go through sticks and stones again, but words, they really don't hurt me. Actually, they do. Words hurt worse than sticks and stones. I've been hit with sticks and they hurt, but sometimes words hurt worse. That's another lie we learned as kids, right? They may break your bones. Breaking bones is horrible, and we used to comfort children with that. Just think about it. Oh yeah, sticks and bones, they'll break your bones. Sticks and stones, they'll break your bones. But words, really? They'll never hurt me? You just lied. You just told me it's okay for sticks and stones to break my bones, and that words don't hurt me. I've never, ever been hit with a stick or a stone. I've never had a broken bone. But I've been hit with sticks and stones. It always hurts. Always. It doesn't always break a bone. It says it may break a bone. But words, I've never been like, "Oh yeah, that's okay. Someone's opinion. They have a right to their opinion." I've never done that. I've always been like, "What'd they say that for? I thought we were friends. Oh my gosh, that hurts. Belshazzar, total different person. He's walking through life, doing his own thing, running just like Nebuchadnezzar. But all of a sudden, God steps in and goes, no, all over, ends here. That's a situation where I'm not patient. I tell my child, hey, listen, you know what? Who knows what this kid's going through? It's not personal. Actually, it is personal. They're being mean to you. But listen, honey, you're just going to have to, I'm sorry. You're going to have to take it. You can stand up for yourself and say, hey, ask them not to do that anymore. And then, but I need you to understand that certain things you got to walk on your own with, okay? Mom and Daddy can't run to school every time something happens, okay? I mean, you can. There's a lot of parents that do that, but you can't do that. We're not going to do that, so you need to work through that. So I'm patient. And if that situation progressively gets worse, there's at some point where I have to step in and make a phone call and say, hey, child's coming home crying. Something needs to be done because I can't come to school. Now, bus stop in front of my house, okay? Same kid gets off the bus. Same other two kids get off the bus. And they push my kid on the ground and they get on top of him and they start hitting him. I don't let that play out. There's no patience involved with that. There's immediate danger. I go out there and I help both of those kids up off my child by their hair. And if they land in a sticker bush, I had no idea it was there. Do you know what I'm saying? That's how I remove those children from my kid, okay? It doesn't mean I'm not patient. The situation demanded immediate decision making. Nebuchadnezzar's situation, for some reason, God says, I'm going to patiently let this man learn. Listen, as he's overthrowing nations, think about this. It wasn't like he was a Boy Scout, who had an issue of this or that on the weekends, and said, well, I need to let him learn that. This guy was ruining nations, and God was being patient with him. Just let that sink in. God thought patience was best for Nebuchadnezzar, to let this work out, so that him and everyone else could see God work in his life. This guy, who's the new king, who's running things, God comes in with a very swift judgment. What does that tell us? We can never presume the grace of God. We can never assume that it's just going to be there for us when we need it. If there are things in your life right now that are contrary to what you believe God's plan for your life is, you need to stop it right now and don't say, oh yeah, there's grace tomorrow for that. Don't do it. Don't do it. What God does for someone else or what even God's been doing for you up to this point doesn't mean that doesn't change tomorrow. We don't take advantage of the grace of God in that way. The grace of God reveals to us wisdom and truth, and we respond to it as best we can. No matter what it is. It doesn't have to be some big, bad thing. It could just be one little thing settling in your heart. One little thing, one little attitude, one little assumption that you have that needs to go. And don't say, I'll deal with it tomorrow, I'll deal with it Monday. He wants this guy to learn a lesson as well. And his judgment is extremely swift. So God's sovereignty is the theme of this. And He's done things with the miraculous. He's done things over time. He's allowed bad things to happen to His people. And that's what's so crazy about God's working. It's not like the Jews were pawns when they were overthrown by Nebuchadnezzar. And God was like, well, somebody's got to do it. Every individual person in that process, every father, every mother, every child, including Daniel, got to experience and see something to help them see God. Every one of them. God didn't do all that just so Nebuchadnezzar could see. Everyone gets exposed. And we'll see that later here as we continue through this chapter. Something we often forget about Daniel is we see Daniel and we see these miracles. Daniel's writing us these highlights that have happened. This isn't the daily life of Daniel. It's not, hey, what's going on? Oh, just interpreted a dream this morning. What about you? The majority of Daniel's life is spent in the mundane of Christianity, even though it wasn't Christianity then, you get my point, in the mundane picture of Christianity, and most of his lifetime is spent reminding himself of who God is and praying to this God that he believes in. And for the Christian, that's very mundane. There's nothing really super fantastic about that. when in fact that is what makes Daniel who he is. And when the time arises, he's ready. When the time comes about, he's ready. There's no doubting, there's no questioning, because he's spent time with God on a regular basis. He already believes this stuff. Daniel isn't being broken. Daniel wasn't taken as a slave so that he could learn God is sovereign. Daniel was taken as a slave because he knew God was sovereign. You see the difference? Some of us are going through things because we know God is sovereign. Some of us are going through things because we need to see that God is sovereign, because we're just not there yet. We still run to the same things when it gets hard. We go back to ourselves. We go back to our opinions. We go back to our attitudes. We never really stand on the gospel and realize that all these things, all these reasons, all these excuses why we do what we do are just false saviors that we are using to get forgiveness. When we lash out at someone, what is our first response? It's never, you know what, I'm a very immature individual and I shouldn't talk to anyone like that. I'm completely sorry. I take complete credit for all my actions. I'm responsible. I'm sorry. What do we normally do? Oh, it's been so hard at work. Oh, gosh, it's so loud in here. My goodness. My bracket's busted. Right? Isn't that what we usually do? Isn't that the kind of stuff we go to? False saviors? Because all we really want is forgiveness and for it to go away. That's all we want. God actually offers that. Nothing else does. God offers us the opportunity to be completely forgiven. We're forgiven already if we're believers. We don't have to go ask God every time we sin for forgiveness. He goes, oh, you're back in. That's not it. But we recognize that it's us, and we can confess it as us because we know we're forgiven, because we know God's grace is sufficient. So we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to have excuses. And all of a sudden we realize I can be me and it's okay. And when I'm okay with me being me, and I realize that I am that type of person and it's no one else's fault, I will take myself and my attitudes a heck of a lot more seriously. And I'll quit breaking other people's hearts and blaming it on who knows what. So God steps in and He's teaching all these people all these different things. And He sees injustice happening. And we have to understand that God's sovereignty in both grace and in judgment is going to be set forth in this book. You hear that? God's sovereignty is both gracious and in judgment. When He reveals nothing but grace and love and mercy and protection, or when He delivers swift judgment. Both of those fall under His sovereignty, and I believe both of them fall under grace. Now, what we know is that this new guy's on the scene. Perhaps he and his father, like Rehoboam, they've chosen young counselors. Because all that's going on here that's happening is there's people outside the gates getting ready to take over. The Medes and the Persians, they're wanting to destroy Babylon and take it over. So this guy decides, you know what, this is serious. Let's have a party. Let's have a big, luscious party. Let's break out all the images we have from all the gods, even the ones that we recovered from the Jews, and let's just party with them. Let's fill them full of wine. Let's fill them full of food. Let's just have a big, knockout, debaucherous party while our enemies are at the gates. What happened with Rehoboam in the Bible is he sought all the counselors his age. Now, there's nothing wrong. It doesn't mean you can't be wise if you're young. It doesn't. But often, the greatest wisdom we have is called experience and remembering. And if you're this tall or this smart in your understanding of everything that's happened historically, you're not going to remember everything that happened with Nebuchadnezzar and be reminded as a lesson that God doesn't play when people are kings. When people are in leadership, God doesn't play, because leaders move people and leaders show people who God is. And if this guy's not doing it my way, I don't want him there anymore, at least not the way he is. I'm going to change him or I'm going to replace him. And that's the history we have with God. But if you're 12 years old and your understanding of things and you haven't been exposed to God's work historically, you're never going to go there first. You're immediately going to go inward. Oh, well, King, if I were you, this is what I would do. I mean, I'm a pretty sharp guy. I mean, I've been around the block a time or two. I've seen a few things. You know, I'm a tough guy. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So perhaps what's happened, the reason he decides to throw this party is not because he's just a party animal, because he's actually sought counsel from his wise men to tell him. But often the new guy, the young guy, the new guy on the scene wants to show everybody up. This is how it's done. This is how we do it. No, we're not going to go old school. I don't need that old man's advice. Look at him. Look at the hair in his ears. What could he possibly have to say to me? When in fact, those are the people that would remember watching Nebuchadnezzar struggle and go through all the things he went through to tell this Rehoboam, listen. I understand what you're thinking. I understand you want to put yourself on display here with this big party for everyone to see how great you are. But your great-granddad did this. He built a statue. And every time they played an instrument, everyone had to bow to this statue and recognize him as the greatest thing in the world. It didn't go so well for him. So I'm just saying, I'm not your boss, but I am saying you may ought to consider, because what happened was God came in and broke your great-grandfather, broke him down. I remember watching him eat grass out of the pasture like an animal. Yeah. All for the purpose of him figuring out who God was, because he wouldn't submit. His pride was too strong. You're starting off early. You could start off on the right foot. But perhaps he didn't ask those guys. Perhaps he didn't seek wisdom. Perhaps that's our problem. We don't want to ask anyone else what they think, because by admitting we need help, we're admitting that we're weak. And if anyone thinks we're weak, then I'm not strong, which is the biggest lie you could ever fall for. There's nothing more humbling to me than for someone to tell me a problem in their life, and immediately, do you know what I realize? This doesn't happen. Pat him on the head. Oh, we'll work through this. You'll be all fine. It's going to take some time. I didn't know how far gone you were. No, when someone comes to me and tells me they're struggling with something, you know what happens? All this weight on my shoulders, this spiritual weight of me trying to be a good guy, just goes douche. And I go, oh, thank you so much. You know what? I think we can counsel each other in this, because I suck too. What were you dealing with again? Tell me about it, right? It's hard, isn't it? Crazy. I know exactly what you're saying. This is what's happening in my life. And the next thing you know, instead of this hierarchical relationship, you have this understanding of, oh my gosh, we're in the same place with the same person. We understand each other. We can push each other in the right direction as we struggle through this and figure this out. But for most of us, we step back, we draw a circle around ourselves because we're supposed to impress everybody like that fried chicken dinner. Don't touch it. Take a picture. Make it look perfect. Make it look fantastic. Make everyone jealous of what we have, when in fact, behind the walls, it could be completely false. Verse 1, it's clear that Belshazzar has blatantly disregarded his responsibilities as monarch, as a king. Second thing we can see about him is he's deliberate and public in his blasphemy of God. Like he took all these things out, these old things of God that people used to worship, and just like, these mean nothing. We're going to use them for debauchery. We're going to use them for this in public. You see, there's private sin, there's public sin. It's all sin. But it's something to stand out in front of other people and say, who cares what you think? Who cares what you think? There's something about that. When you say, who cares what you think, God knows people are watching you. He's going to do something. He's going to do something swift. Thirdly, we see here in the beginning of this chapter that his sinful heart had caused him to be completely blind. That's what we always forget about sin. With sin, we think we're getting something we really want that God doesn't want us to have. And the reason we think we want it, or the reason we do want it, is because we're blind. That's why we use the word regret. Because at some point in your life, you made a decision to do something and thought it was a good idea, but when you think about it now, you react as if you were blind at that moment. What an idiot. What was I thinking? What is wrong with me? Why would I do such a thing? And I'm not talking about 80s haircuts. Those were awesome, by the way. I get to see those every once in a while on Facebook, you know, like a homecoming photo where there's like 12 or 15 girls. You know how y'all used to do that? 12 or 15 of you, and there's like a little sliver of blue and red, maybe some shiny stuff here and there, and the rest is just hair. I mean, like I'm talking, wow, just crimped, fuzzy hair. Like you just that stuff for days. And then rain netted the tar out of it and said, look at me, I look awesome. And all of you look like you had a head like a ping pong ball because your hair was so big, right? Check me out. And you look back at that and you don't go, I'm doing that again. That was awesome. Maybe for 80s night, maybe for Halloween, but you're not going to show up at work on Monday like that. Hey, what's up? Oh yeah, this is the new me. I thought this was awesome, right? You thought it was awesome then, but right now you're just like, oh my gosh, I need to recall every yearbook from 80 through 84. It was horrible. I need to burn them. I need all of them immediately, right now. That's what sin does. I'm not saying that hair was sinful. Someone may argue that, but I'm not. I thought it was pretty cool at the time. But sin blinds us to make us things that are completely wrong believe they're right. And that's what happened with this guy. He is completely blind to the reality of his situation. I just want to read you a couple of these verses before we close, and we're going to follow up next week and or 2 weeks from now, and re-explain this stuff as it moves forward to the interpretation of the writing on the wall. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem, he brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels, and that they had and been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines, they all drank from them. They drank wine, and they praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall in the king's palace opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hands as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. The king called loudly to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, the astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and shall be the third ruler in his kingdom. The verses that Brian read earlier is when Daniel gets to talk to him and confront him about what's going on. He wants to pay someone, he wants to buy someone to come and tell him what this means because it's cut him to his heart. Nebuchadnezzar had things to shake him. But then there was this time of response because he rejected it and he moved forward, just like Egypt, just like with Pharaoh. He just couldn't submit. He just couldn't believe there was someone more powerful than him. He just couldn't give that up. And you would think, well, I'm not trying to run nations. Maybe not. Maybe you're trying to run your friends. Maybe you're trying to run your family. Maybe you're trying to run your office. Maybe you're trying to run this. Maybe you're trying to run that. Maybe you're trying to run everything. Maybe you need everything to go a certain direction. And if it doesn't, you won't be happy until it does. Maybe that's why you're not happy, because it was never meant to be that way. You were never given that much authority because you can't handle it. And number two, even if you could handle it, you wouldn't do it God's way. That's exactly what's happening here. These guys are wanting all this power and all this authority, and the whole time their kingdoms are crumbling around them. It's just a figment. It's a picture of power. It's a picture of wisdom. It's a picture of authority. And God is saying, look, the enemy is at the gates. He's standing right outside your house, and he loves what he's seeing. He's seeing you dissolve from the inside out, and he loves it. He can move on to someone else because you're killing yourselves. Please, take these wake-up calls. These songs that catch your ear and catch your heart and remind you of something. You experience those emotions of being close to God again, and you're just like, oh man, where have I gone? What have I done? What am I thinking? Or maybe it's those stories from your childhood and you're reminded of this happening and God being faithful and you actually believing it. To now where you're just like, yeah, if I had to choose, I'd choose Jesus over all the other religions. God wants us to know that He is who He says He is. And He doesn't want to take you through pain to get there, but He will because He loves you. Bow your heads and close your eyes for a moment. I hope I've said this enough for you to be able to quote it, because it's so true. God whispers to us through His creation. He says, something great is here. Something unexplainable is here. He speaks to us through His Word, through the Bible. He speaks to us plainly and He says, this is who I am and this is how I operate. These are the things I do. This is who you are. This is how you operate. These are the things you do. Do you see how we're different? Follow me. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. That's what the Bible speaks to us. He screams to us through pain. Not at us, to us. It could be a small pain. It could be a stumping of a toe, per se. It could be something going on terrible at work. It could be stress in the family. But all of it is Him screaming to us because we're in a position where we realize maybe we can't handle this on our own. And He just wants you to say what Nebuchadnezzar said. There is one God and He is sovereign. And not only is He sovereign, but He is good and I can trust Him with my life. And that's what I want everyone around me to be able to say. Not that I was good and I was smart and I was handsome and I was pretty and I was this and I was that. But God is more than we could ever ask. He is more than we could ever ask. Father, as we're reminded again from a character in your word about the opportunity and the ability to make decisions and move in directions and make this awesome and make this fantastic and have a party and do this and all of it is just a distraction from the reality that the greatest thing that's ever happened is us having our eyes open to know that you're real and you're there. Thank you for the constant reminders. Forgive me, forgive us when we don't respond to those and we just assume your patience will be there forever. When in fact, you're willing to take this as far as you have to get my attention now. Because there's so much for me. There's so much peace available for my life. There's so much patience available for me to show others because I know these things are true. The list goes on and on of all that's available for me by simply believing this fact and standing on it. Help us get it. Help us understand it. Thank you for the Lord's Supper today. Thank you for Brian and Lori for setting this up. Thank you for the beautiful reminder of your sacrifice for us, to knowing that we can be forgiven for anything because you are that big and that strong, and your sacrifice was that sufficient in Jesus. But don't let us presume your patience and just move on with our lives. Help us daily walk with you in understanding that you are using us for amazing things, great things. And those things are other people seeing our value of you and not so much concerned with their value of us. Help that be our portion. Help that be the thing we crave. We love you and thank you for all you do. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.